All right, so we should be ready at this point to start putting in some formulas into our uh, task table or our task list. It's not a table yet. So let's go ahead and save our file for our next section. Let's call this task table formulas 1. So now that you'll see that in our example file, we can put in some tasks, and we have some calculations going on. While we're looking at this, I've put in gray some of the sections that are calculated. They're not manually entered, so maybe we should add some of that in. So plan remaining, plan start, plan end, those are all going to be gray, because those will end up being calculated and not manually entered. Actual days will end up being calculated also. All right, and you can see that these dates get translated into shaded sections on the Gantt chart. So we're going to do some of the setup to do some of these calculations and prepare things to be able to display them on the Gantt chart. All right, so one of the first things we need to set up is anytime we're in any of these cells that correspond with tasks, we need to figure out what date is represented in that column. So we need to set up a named range for that. So we can go to our formulas ribbon and the name manager and click new, and let's just name this date, and this is just going to be used in this worksheet. And you'll see scope, you can actually specify if it's for the whole workbook, which is all the sheets in the workbook, or for just a specific sheet. And we're only going to use this in this sheet, so probably not a bad idea to limit the scope a little bit. So we'll just switch that to the name of this worksheet, the task Gantt example. And anytime that we're in a column, we're going to be looking at row 17 to find the date. So we have our worksheet there, and we're in column W, but we want this to work with any other column that we happen to be in. So we're going to take away that $sign, and we know that our date is up in row 17. So we're going to have this date equals task Gantt example W $17. And let's hit OK, and let's hit close. And just to test that out, equals date, and we should see a number. That is a number there. If we want to see it, we can go ahead and you'll see that that is the date number that would correspond with that. I'm going to go ahead and format that back to and that will work in other cells and match the date there. So I'm just going to delete that. So now that we have date set up, just to be able to have, okay, let's go ahead and let's add a few more tasks just to have a little more data there to work with. I'm going to call this forward 2. The name doesn't really matter too much. I think what I'm actually going to do is clear those out. Let's turn this into a table first. So I have my headers and I have a piece of data and I want to turn this into a table. So I'm going to go to the insert ribbon table, and we see this is going from B19 to U20. That is correct. It stops because we had a gap there in our V column, and it says it has a header, which is also correct. And let's rename this our task table. Okay. So now that we've created this as a table, let's add a couple extra pieces of data. Our next ID number. And you'll see now that this is a table, when we're adding a new row, it brings this table formatting down and gives us our data to work with. I'm going to just leave that there for a date, and let's have another plan days, and let's do another one, and we'll make this a backward example. Make that one a backward example also. Okay, we'll call that good for now. So all of these, we're just using a start date and a duration, a planned number of days that we think it's probably going to take. So to move further on this, we're going to create some more named ranges that we can work with. You'll notice that when I change this to a table, it automatically changed my text to white on gray, and I'm going to go and change that text color to automatic and just fix that. I like it darker instead of lighter. I just went up here and selected the font color and hit automatic, and that switched it back for me. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to want to look at is our plan start and our plan end, and these independent start and end dates, and our planned number of days that we think things will take, and we want to be able to refer to these in the cells, and I'm going to pick some names to make some of our formulas a little simpler later. So this first one is our plan start row, and if we go to our formulas ribbon and our name manager, and we can hit new, and we'll call that plan start, and we will be looking at that one row at a time, so I'm going to use row on the end of that. We're really only going to use this in this worksheet, and we know that is Q, always going to be column Q, so we'll leave the $Q, but the first row is 20, but we want the other rows to be able to use their own dates. So we're going to take out the $, so that's $Q20, and we'll hit OK. And then we want to do the plan end row. Let's go new plan end row. Switch the scope to just this worksheet, and this is going to be in R20, so we'll change that to $R20. Hit OK. And then plan days row. So let's do new plan days row. Switch the scope to just this worksheet, and that is column O. But I am going to make one adjustment here, and right now this would require somebody to put in the planned number of work days, and I wanted to add something that if they forget to enter that, that it will just default to one work day. But if they do enter something, then I want it to be, what they enter. And anytime, if they enter one work day, great. If it's going to be larger than that, I want the highest value between one work day and that. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a formula and call this max. And then it's going to select the maximum value out of there. So it's either going to be what's entered in the cell, or it will default to a value of 1. And this is one challenge I've seen in my Excel, and that I know I typed that in, but it didn't show up there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit, you'll see it, there's a good lag there. It did finally show up. So sometimes Excel can be a little glitchy, so just be prepared for that. So I'm going to hit OK. And so there's our days. We want our independent start date and independent end date, whatever value is on a row for that. So let's go to new and say end start row, and I'm just trying to keep the names consistent so that it doesn't get too confusing. It is complicated, so I try to just keep the names as much as the same as much as possible. Task Gantt, and that is J20, so we're going to say J and take the $sign out of the 20, hit OK, new independent end row with this worksheet, and that is K20, so $K20. We are going to do something with the planned start and planned end dates, all of the dates in the column. So we're going to make a named range for the entire column, that whatever happens to be there. So we're going to say new, and we'll call that plan start call. And again, that's just going to be in this worksheet. and we can go ahead and use the name of our table here. We'll call that task table and plan start. And hit OK. And we want the same thing for the plan end column. So we'll go new, plan end, call with the worksheet, and this refers to task table and the planned end column. All right, now we're going to put in a formula here. So if we need to get our plan start date, and right now these formulas we're gonna build on as we go. But for right now, if an independent start date has been specified, we want to use that. So we're going to use an if formula to do that. So we're going to say equals if, and we're going to test if there's an independent start date. So we're going to use our named range. We're going to say end start row, and we want to see if there's anything there, if it's not empty. So if it's not empty, we can test with that by doing less than, greater than signed, and 2 double quotes, looking for blank. And if that is not empty, then we just want to use that value. So it's the end start row. If it's blank, for right now, we're just going to do a message saying that we need a start date. And we'll fill that in. And you see that when we put this in the top row of our list, it actually automatically added the dates to our other cells. We do need to format these as dates, so we can go ahead and select the plan start and plan end. We know those are going to all be dates, and right click, format cells, number, date, and we have a date right there, so that looks okay. And those match now, and these really are just matching what's going to be here. So if we change one of these, you'll see that it updates right there. So and then if we have a start date and we have a duration, the planned number of days, we want to calculate the plan end. And this is something that we're going to use another calculation. So we're actually going to build a calculation formula and not enter it directly in the cell. So again, we're going to go to Name Manager, New, and we'll create a plan end calculation. I just am naming it so that I know that this is a calculation, and I'm going to limit this scope to this worksheet, and we will enter a formula in here, and we're going to use a function called workday. And what workday does is it gives us um, a date based on working days and not weekends. So it's going to use some of our weekend functions to avoid weekends and holidays. So we're going to go to our first day is going to be our plan start row, and then we're going to do plan days row -1. So we have, we need a start date, we need the number of days, and then that's going to be our work days, and then we need our holidays list. Okay, so we're going to hit OK. And let's go ahead and enter that into our cell. Again, we're going to use another if statement to double check that that's not empty. So we're going to use a very similar calculation to the start date calculation. We'll do equals if plan start row, and use our test to see if it's empty, because we're going to need a start date to be able to calculate this. And if it's, as long as it's not empty, then we're going to use our plan end calculation. And if it is empty, we're going to say we need start, and we'll put that in. And now you'll see we have some calculations there. So this should start on the 12th, and with 2 work days, 1, 2. This should start on August 1st with 2 work days. We can see we have 1, 2. And then looks like that is working and got moved down. Okay, so I think the other thing that I want to fix here is we had just hard-coded a starting date of the current date. And we want to make this so that this is a little more dynamic and is based on the tasks listed in the task table. So to do that, we're going to fill in a couple of our dates up here and under this project summary information. So first we're going to go look and see an overall start date. The overall start date is going to be the earliest date in our plan start. So as long as we have something in this column, then we can fill it out. So we're going to use another if statement there. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to test and see if Q20 is empty or not. And if it's not empty, we're going to take the smallest in the plan start column. If it is empty, then we will just use the current date as the default date. And we know these first 4 cells are all going to be dates, so we can format them as dates. Format cells, date, that looks okay. All right, so it gave us 7/12, and that makes sense because that is the earliest date in that list. An overall end date, and that's going to be the latest date in that list. So I'm actually going to test and see if we have a beginning date and end date there. And so to test for both of those, I use this AND function, and you'll see it has and then parentheses and the first test, comma, and then the second test. It's just a nice way to do multiple tests at the same time. And if that's true, then we're going to use the highest date in the plan end column. Otherwise, we will take our beginning date and add a day as a default. So we can hit enter once you have that formula entered, and you'll see our overall end date says 8/2, and that's the highest value in that column. So that might be a date for a start date we could use, except I want to be able to filter our list according to groups. So right now, like, I have a couple different groups here, and if I just wanted to look at one of these, I could just select the one that I wanted and hit OK, or I could switch to the other. And I want this Gantt chart to update according to what I've filtered and not just for the project overall. So we're going to use another formula that actually allows us to just look at a filtered list. So for the start date, again, we want the earliest date in the list. And the formula that we're going to use is this subtotal formula. So again, we're testing if the first cell on the list for the start date is empty. If it's not, then we're going to use this subtotal. And these options are what type of function you actually want to do. So option 5 is doing the minimum. And we're going to again use the plan start column. And if it's not there, then we're just going to use today's date. So I'm going to need a closing parentheses on that. And let's hit enter. And now we can see we get our date of all the dates there that matches. And let's go ahead and fill in our filtered end date. And it's very similar to our other end date formula. We're testing if either of those start dates and end dates are empty. As long as they're not, then we're going to calculate the maximum from the plan end column, and this subtotal option 4 gives us the maximum. And if that's not there, then we're going to just take our start date and add a day. And we'll hit enter. And right now you'll see these both match because we don't have any filter on. But if I go to filter and maybe just take the forward example and hit OK. You'll see 7, 12, and 8, 2 are there. And if I went and switched the filter to the backward example, you'll see now it just has 7, 12, and 7, 17. So finally, the thing that I want to switch is I don't want this to just be today's date. I want it to actually be our filtered start date. So that will, and it just so happens to be the same date as today, but if we went and changed both of these to change those out, you'll see now we start with the start date that is in our filtered list. So this gives us a lot of flexibility for looking at maybe different phases of a project and just focusing down or drilling down onto a particular phase. But we can see you know, it's gonna give us a lot of flexibility and planning in here. So I think that's enough on this section, and save your file if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.